The phone was lying face up on the marble floor of a luxury hotel lobby. Liam Carter, a widowed single father still in his work uniform after a long shift, bent down and picked it up. Across the lobby, a woman in an expensive suit was already moving toward him, her face tight with something closer to panic than inconvenience. But before he could take a single step in her direction, the screen lit up. Liam went completely still. The lock screen photo was not a family member, not a pet, not a landscape. It was his own face staring back at him, a photo of him, a grown man saved by a stranger he had never met. Liam did not move right away. He stood there in the middle of the hotel lobby, the phone loose in his hand, staring at a face he recognized immediately because it was his own. Not an old photo, not something blurry or cropped from a group shot. It was a clear recent image of him taken from a distance, the kind of photo a person takes without the subject ever knowing. His work jacket was visible in the frame. He had worn that jacket for the past 2 years. The woman reached him before he could process any of it. She was dressed in a charcoal blazer and tailored trousers, the kind of outfit that did not come off a sale rack. Her dark hair was pulled back cleanly, and her face composed and sharp under normal circumstances. He guessed was doing something it clearly was not used to doing. It was showing fear. Not the mild embarrassment of someone who dropped their phone. Something deeper. Something that looked a lot like being caught. Liam held the phone out toward her without a word. The screen was still lit. She looked down at it, then back up at him, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The lobby moved around them, a bellman crossing with a luggage cart. 2 men in suits talking near the elevator bank, the low sound of a piano coming from somewhere deeper in the building. None of it touched the strange stillness between the two of them. She was the one who finally spoke. Her voice was steady but only just. "You saw it," she said. It was not a question. Liam kept his expression even. He had spent years doing physical work in buildings full of people who talked past him, and he had learned a long time ago not to react before he understood a situation. "Your phone was on the floor," he said. "I picked it up." She reached out and took it from him. Her fingers were careful, deliberate. She pressed the phone against her side like she was putting something away that had already said too much. Then she looked at him again, and her expression shifted into something he could not quite name. Not embarrassment, exactly. Not relief. Something that looked more like a person bracing for a conversation they had been rehearsing for years. "Do you really not recognize me?" she asked. Liam looked at her, the way a person looks at someone they are genuinely trying to place. He took in her face, the line of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the way she held herself with the particular stillness of someone who had spent a long time teaching herself not to fidget. Nothing came to him. He was certain he had never met this woman. He would have remembered. "I don't," he said. "Should I?" Something moved across her face. It was brief, and she controlled it quickly, but he caught it. It was the look of a person absorbing a small blow. She straightened slightly. "Charlotte Hayes," she said. The name landed without much weight at first. Then it landed again. Hayes Dynamics. He had seen that name on the news on the side of a building downtown, on the screen of a television in a waiting room, once, while he was filling out paperwork for a maintenance contract. Charlotte Hayes was the kind of name that appeared in headlines. He had never had a reason to connect it to a person standing directly in front of him. "I know the name," he said carefully. "But not me," she said. "No," he said, "not you." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had suspected, but hoped might not be true. The lobby continued around them. A woman in heels clicked past without looking up from her phone. Liam was aware that he was still in his work uniform boots, dark cargo pants, a jacket with a small company logo on the chest, standing in the kind of hotel where the flower arrangement in the center of the lobby probably cost more than his monthly electric bill. He was not embarrassed by this, but he was aware of it. Charlotte looked toward the hotel bar at the far end of the lobby. It was quiet at this hour, most of the conference crowd having already filtered out. I owe you an explanation, she said. I know how that looked. She glanced back at him. Can I buy you a coffee? I'll keep it short. Liam looked at her for a moment. Everything in his experience told him to say no politely and walk out. He had a drive ahead of him. He had things to do. He did not know this woman, and whatever reason she had for keeping his photo on her phone was almost certainly something he did not need to be involved in. The rational thing was to leave. But there was something in the way she had said, I owe you an explanation, that stopped him. Not the words themselves, the weight behind them, the sense that she had been carrying something for a long time and had just entirely by accident run out of room to carry it alone. All right, he said. Short? They sat in a corner of the hotel bar, a small table between them. 2 cups of coffee neither of them touched at first. Charlotte set her phone face down on the table. Liam rested his forearms on the edge and waited. He was good at waiting. It was something his work had built into him, the ability to stay quiet while a situation revealed itself. Charlotte looked at the table for a moment, then at him. We went to the same high school, she said. Westbrook High. You graduated 20 years ago. So did I. Liam thought about it. Westbrook. He had gone there. He remembered the building, the parking lot, the smell of the gymnasium in winter. He remembered teachers, a few of them, and he remembered people he had been close to. He did not remember Charlotte Hayes. I believe you, he said, but I don't remember you. I know, she said. I was easy to not remember. She said it without self-pity. She said it like a fact she had made peace with a long time ago. I wore glasses. I was quiet. I sat near the back in most classes, and I didn't talk much. I wasn't the kind of person who stood out. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. You were different. Everyone knew who you were. Liam shifted slightly in his seat. He was not entirely comfortable with this framing, but he let her continue. There was a day in the cafeteria, Charlotte said. Junior year. A group of students, I won't go into all of it, but it got bad. Public. The kind of thing that when you're 17 feels like it's going to define you forever. Her voice remained controlled, but there was something underneath it that had not been fully smoothed out. You were at a different table. You didn't know me. You had no reason to get involved. She looked at him directly. But you did. You stood up. You walked over and you said something to them and it stopped. Just like that. Liam listened. He was trying to find the memory and coming up empty. Not because he doubted her. Her certainty was too specific to be invented. But because whatever he had done that day had not registered as significant to him. It had been a moment. A decision that took maybe 30 seconds. He had no memory of it at all. I don't remember that, he said. I know, she said again. I've known that for a long time. She looked down at her coffee. That's the part that's hard to explain. That moment was probably nothing to you. It was Tuesday. You moved on. She lifted her eyes back to his. But for me, it was the moment I decided I wasn't going to disappear. It sounds dramatic, I know. But when you're that age, and you feel that invisible, and then someone who has no obligation to you at all, sees what's happening and does something about it, it changes the way you understand things. It changed the way I understood myself. Liam sat with that for a moment. He was not a man who was easily made uncomfortable, but something about hearing this, the plainness of it, the lack of any performance, settled on him in a way that was difficult to shake off. He thought about being 17. He had been a different person then, in the ways that everyone is different at 17, less certain of some things, more careless about others. He could not reconstruct every choice he had made in those hallways. Apparently, some of them had consequences he had never accounted for. After graduation, Charlotte continued. I tried to find you. I went back to Westbrook, asked around. Someone told me you'd moved. I didn't have a last name at first, just Liam. It took me a long time. She glanced at the phone lying face down between them. I'm not trying to make this sound less strange than it is. I know how it looks. I know what you must be thinking." "I'm not thinking anything yet," Liam said. "I'm still listening." Charlotte accepted that with a small nod. "I followed your career the way you follow someone when you have no real connection to them, but you feel like you owe them something. Not obsessively. But I kept track. I found out where you were working. I saw that you'd gotten married." She stopped there for just a breath. "And then I saw that you lost her. Your wife. I read about it in a local piece years ago. An accident." She did not reach across the table. She did not perform sympathy. She just said it directly. "I'm sorry. I never had any right to know that about your life. But I did. And I never came forward because I didn't know what I would even say." The bar was quiet. Someone was ordering something at the counter on the far side of the room. The piano from the lobby had stopped. Liam looked at the woman across from him. She was not what he had expected when he walked into this building tonight. He had expected to drop off a building report, sign something, and leave. Instead, he was sitting across from a stranger who had just handed him a version of his own life that he had no idea existed, a version where something he had done and forgotten had mattered enormously to someone he had never properly seen. "Why the photo, Hiebite?" he asked. It was the question he had been sitting with since the moment the screen lit up. Charlotte did not look away. "Because I needed to remember what it looked like," she said. "When someone does the right thing for no reason. I run a company. I make decisions every day that affect a lot of people. And it's easy, after enough time, to start doing things for the wrong reasons, efficiency optics, self-interest." The photo was a reminder. That's all it was. It was never meant to be anything more than that. Liam looked at her for a long moment. There was nothing in her expression that suggested she was trying to impress him. She was not leaning forward. She was not performing vulnerability. She had told him the truth the way a person tells the truth when they have stopped caring what the listener thinks and only care that the thing finally gets said. He picked up his coffee. It had gone slightly cool. He drank it anyway. "That's a strange thing to carry around for 20 years, he said. "Yes," she said. "It is." Outside the hotel, the city moved in its usual way, cars passing a siren somewhere far off the ordinary rhythm of a night that had no idea it had just become unusual. Liam sat across from Charlotte Hayes and understood for the first time since picking up that phone that the conversation they were having was not really about the past at all. It was about two people who had just looked at each other clearly for the first time, and neither of them yet knew what to do with what they saw. He did not leave right away, and she did not ask him to. They stayed at that corner table until the bar staff began stacking chairs at the far end of the room, and even then, neither of them moved with any particular urgency. They talked about smaller things, the building he had come from that evening, a project she had been managing across 3 time zones, the specific exhaustion of work that never fully stops. Nothing significant, but it was the kind of conversation that fills a space in a way that leaves you aware of it later when the space is empty again. When he finally walked out into the night, Liam did not have a name for what had just happened. He was not sure he needed one yet. He just knew that the story was not quite finished. They met for coffee 3 more times over the following 2 weeks. Nothing was planned formally. Charlotte would send a short message at a diner near his side of the city, a place that did not require a reservation or a dress code, and Liam would either confirm or push it to another day. It had the texture of 2 people who were not entirely sure what they were doing, but had decided, without saying so, to keep doing it anyway. Liam was not a man who talked about himself easily. He had spent years being the person in the room who fixed things and left, and that role had suited him. But Charlotte asked questions the way she seemed to do most things directly without decoration, and he found himself answering in ways that surprised him. He told her about the building maintenance work, about the evening repair jobs he picked up on the side, about the particular satisfaction of understanding exactly what was wrong with something and knowing how to correct it. She listened without trying to reframe any of it. She did not tell him he was capable of more. She just listened, and that was rarer than he expected from someone in her position. For her part, Charlotte was not the version of herself that appeared in press photos and quarterly statements. She was quieter in person than her public reputation suggested, more careful with her words, and occasionally when something struck her as genuinely funny, she laughed in a way that seemed to catch even her off guard. Liam noticed these things without making a production of noticing them. He was a person who observed quietly, and what he observed was a woman who had built something enormous and was underneath it still somewhat surprised that she had. There was no arrogance in her. There was discipline, and there was drive, and there was the particular self-awareness of someone who had spent years examining her own motivations, but arrogance was not part of it. He found that notable. On the fourth meeting, she told him something she had not said in the hotel bar. She told him that she had been in love with him in high school. Not the soft, vague kind of feeling that teenagers project onto people they admire. The specific, painful, fully conscious kind that a person carries alone because they are certain it has nowhere to go. She said it plainly, the way she had said everything else, looking at her coffee cup, and then at him. She was not asking him to do anything with the information. She was just finishing the sentence that had been left open for 20 years. Liam did not say anything immediately. He turned the information over, the way he turned over a problem methodically, without rushing to a conclusion. Then he said, "Why are you telling me now?" Charlotte looked at him steadily. "Because I've been not telling you for 20 years," she said, "and I'm tired of managing things I don't need to manage anymore." It was an honest answer. He respected it, even if he did not know yet what to do with it. He was a man still living inside a grief he had mostly learned to work around. His wife had been gone for 6 years, and the absence had become something structural, like a wall that was simply part of the floor plan now. He was not closed, but he was not open in the way Charlotte might have hoped. He told her that, also plainly. She said she understood. He believed her. What neither of them anticipated was how quickly the outside world would decide the meaning of what they were doing before either of them had figured it out themselves. A photographer, the kind who made a living following people whose names appeared in financial news, caught them outside the diner after the third meeting. The image that circulated was not dramatic. It was just 2 people on a sidewalk. Liam in his jacket, Charlotte in a coat standing close enough to suggest familiarity. The caption did the rest of the work. The story that assembled itself online had a clean, convenient shape. A tech CEO worth hundreds of millions of dollars photographed repeatedly with an unknown man in work clothes. The narrative wrote itself without requiring any facts to support it. Within 48 hours, Liam's full name had been surfaced by several accounts, and the framing was consistent across all of them that he was a struggling tradesman who had found a way into a wealthy woman's orbit and was not letting go. Some of it was mocking. Some of it was more pointed than that. A few accounts dug up his work history, his employer, the neighborhood where he lived. People who had never been in the same room as him were constructing detailed theories about his character and his intentions, and those theories were being shared and reshared by people who found the shape of the story more interesting than the accuracy of it. Liam found out the way people usually found out about things like this. Someone he knew sent him a link with a short message that said nothing more than, "You might want to see this." He read through several of the posts with the same expression he used when assessing a problem in a mechanical room, steady, unemotional cataloging. Then he put his phone down and went back to work. He was in the middle of replacing a water line in a commercial building, and the line did not care what the internet thought. But the effects were not abstract for long. His supervisor mentioned casually and with visible discomfort that the company had received some calls. The calls were not complaints about his work. They were calls from people who felt, for reasons that were not clearly stated, that his presence in the company was now a liability. The supervisor did not make any decisions on the spot, but Liam understood the shape of what was coming. He had been in enough situations to recognize the posture of someone preparing to do something they found unpleasant, but had already decided to do. A couple of people he had known for years through his work circuit, other tradesmen, a building manager he had a good relationship with, went quiet in ways that were small enough to be deniable and obvious enough to be unmistakable. One of them stopped returning his messages about a shared contract. Another ran into him at a supply store and was suddenly very interested in leaving. Liam noted these things without dwelling on them, but he noted them. He called Charlotte the evening after the supervisor conversation. He did not lead with the media. He asked her how her week was going, and she was quiet for a moment before she said, "You've seen it." It was not a question. "Some of it," he said. She told him that Hayes Dynamics' communications team had flagged it internally, that her board had not said anything formal yet, but that she had received 2 private messages from members that were, she said, diplomatically worded in a way that means the opposite of what they say. She had been asked without being explicitly asked to consider the optics of her visible associations. The phrasing had been careful, the meaning hadn't been. Liam listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "I'm sorry this got into your company." "Don't do that," Charlotte said, and there was an edge in her voice that he had not heard before. "Don't apologize for something that was done to us by people with too much time and too few facts." "I'm not apologizing for the situation," he said. "I'm just saying I didn't want to be a problem for you." She did not respond to that directly, and the conversation wound down shortly after. But something had shifted in the space between them, subtle and significant. They were no longer just 2 people having coffee. They had become a story that other people were telling, and the story those people were telling had nothing to do with a hotel lobby or a high school cafeteria or 20 years of one person quietly carrying a memory that had shaped the direction of her life. The story other people were telling was simpler and uglier and much easier to share. The pressure from Hayes Dynamics did not let up. Charlotte's assistant, a woman named Rachel, who functioned as the first line between Charlotte and every demand on her time, told her quietly one morning that 2 board members had requested a private call. Charlotte took the call. She did not relay the full contents of it to Liam, but he did not need the full contents. He had already begun drawing his own conclusions. 3 days later, a tabloid piece ran with a more structured version of the story, pulled quotes from anonymous sources, references to Liam's financial situation, a timeline of when the 2 of them had been photographed together. It was presented as journalism. It had the architecture of a hit. The anonymous sources described Liam in ways that made clear they had never met him and were not particularly interested in accuracy. He read the piece once, closed the tab, and did not open it again. What he could not close so easily was the accumulation, the supervisor's discomfort, the colleagues who had gone quiet, the piece, the way his name was now attached to a narrative he had not written and could not correct. He had built his life carefully around stability, the same job, the same routines, the same quiet commitment to doing his work well and coming home. That stability was now being interfered with by something he had not chosen and could not control. And the interference was coming from his proximity to Charlotte. He did not resent her. That was important to him, and he was honest with himself about it. He did not resent her for any of this, but he understood with the same mechanical clarity he brought to every problem that he was not capable of absorbing this indefinitely. He was not a man with a publicist or a legal team or a communications department. He was a man with a job and a life that depended on being left alone to do it. And none of those things were designed to withstand this kind of pressure. He made a decision. He did not make it quickly or easily, but once he made it, he did not second-guess it. He would step back. He would stop responding to her messages, give the story nothing new to feed on, and let the distance do what distance does. He had filed an inquiry with a company in another city about a position better pay a fresh start, a place where his name meant nothing to anyone. He began working through the logistics of what a move would require. Charlotte came to him before he had finished working through them. She showed up at the building where he was finishing an evening job. No appointment, no warning. She was not in her professional presentation. She was in a coat and dark jeans, and she looked like someone who had driven across the city without thinking it through, and was now standing in a maintenance corridor, trying to remember why she thought this was a good idea. Liam looked at her for a long moment before he said anything. Then he said, "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said. "I came anyway." He set down the tool he was holding. He had been thinking about what to say to her for days, running through it the way he ran through a repair sequence, methodically making sure each step followed from the last. But standing in front of her now, the sequence felt less certain. "You have everything," he said. "A company, a position, a reputation that took you 20 years to build. I'm not going to be the thing that costs you any of that." Charlotte looked at him with an expression that was not soft and was not angry. It was something more difficult, the look of a person watching someone make a mistake they cannot be talked out of. "That's not your decision to make for me," she said. "I'm making it for me," he said. "I'm not built for this, Charlotte. I don't have the infrastructure for it, and neither of us should have to build it just to have a conversation." She stood there for a moment without speaking. The corridor hummed with the sound of the building's systems, the ordinary mechanical breath of a structure doing what it was designed to do. Then she said quietly, "Is this the last time?" Liam looked at her and told her the truth, because she had always told him the truth. "I don't know," he said. "I think it might have to be." She left without a scene. That was consistent with everything he had come to understand about her. She did not perform her pain. She absorbed it and walked back out into the night with it, and the corridor was quiet again, and Liam stood in it, alone, and understood with the particular heaviness of a decision you know is reasonable and still cannot make yourself feel good about that. He had just let go of something he had not yet fully understood how much he wanted to hold on to. The weeks after that corridor were quiet in the way that certain kinds of quiet are not restful. Liam worked. He took on extra jobs in the evenings, filled his schedule, the way a person fills silence deliberately with purpose, making sure there was always something that needed doing, so that the thing he was not doing could not take up too much space. He had not submitted the transfer paperwork yet. He kept telling himself he would get to it. He did not get to it. He was not sure what he was waiting for. That bothered him more than the waiting itself. He was a person who understood systems, mechanical systems, structural systems, the kind where you trace a problem back to its source and address it directly. But what he was feeling in the weeks after the corridor did not behave like a system. It had no clear source and no clean solution. It was just there, low and persistent, the way certain sounds in a building are there, present enough to notice. Difficult enough to locate that you eventually stop trying and simply live with the noise. Charlotte did not contact him after the corridor. He had half expected her to push back. She was not a woman who accepted conclusions she disagreed with, but she didn't. The silence from her side was clean and complete, and he respected it, even as it settled into something heavier than he had anticipated. He checked his phone less than usual. He told himself this was because he was busy. He was not entirely convinced. The Hayes Dynamics anniversary event was not something he had planned to watch. He knew it was happening. It had been mentioned in the news cycle in the days leading up to it. One of those corporate milestones that made the business section because the company was large enough to merit coverage. He had no particular reason to tune in. He was in the middle of a kitchen repair on a weekday evening when his phone propped against the backsplash picked up the live stream automatically through an alert he had never turned off. He let it run in the background while he worked. The event was formal, a large venue well lit, the kind of stage that had been designed to make whoever stood on it look significant. There were speakers before Charlotte, introductions, remarks from other executives, a video reel of company milestones set to music. Liam worked through most of it without paying close attention. He was focused on the pipe fitting in front of him. Then Charlotte walked onto the stage, and something in the quality of her presence made him set down his tools. She stood at the podium in a dark blazer, her hair back the way she always wore it, and she looked out at the audience with the same stillness he recognized from the hotel bar, controlled, deliberate, a person who had decided exactly what she was going to say, and was going to say it regardless of how it landed. She thanked the company. She talked briefly about the past year, about the projects that had moved forward, and the ones that had required longer than expected, and the particular kind of patience that large-scale work demands. And then she stopped, and the shape of what she was about to do shifted something in the room that was visible even through a small phone screen. She said she wanted to talk about something she had never spoken about publicly. She said that people often asked her what had shaped her as a leader, and that the honest answer was not a book or a mentor or a particular business decision. It was a Tuesday in a high school cafeteria more than 20 years ago, when a classmate she barely knew stood up in the middle of a room full of people and did something simple and decent for no reason other than that it was the right thing to do. She did not name him immediately. She described the moment, the group of students, the public humiliation, the specific quality of helplessness that a person feels when they are being reduced in front of an audience, and then the way it stopped. Because one person decided it should. I went home that day, Charlotte said, standing in front of several hundred people and a live stream camera, and I made a decision. I decided that if someone could do that for me when they had no obligation to, then I could build something. I could stop being invisible. I could make myself into a person who was worth that act of decency. She did not dramatize it. She delivered it the way she delivered everything, steadily, without performance. His name is Liam Carter. He doesn't know I'm saying this tonight. He probably still doesn't remember the moment I'm describing. But I want it on the record, because the company standing behind me right now has his fingerprints on it, in ways he will never fully understand. The room went quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when something true has just been said, in a space that is not always designed for truth. Liam was sitting on the kitchen floor with a pipe wrench in his hand. He was watching a woman he had walked away from stand in front of the world and credit him with something he had spent 20 years not knowing he had done. He did not move for a long moment. He was not a person who cried easily, but something in his chest had gone dense and pressurized in a way that required him to breathe carefully until it settled. He had told her she should not have to build infrastructure just to have a conversation. He had told her he was not built for the attention, and she had not argued with him about any of that. She had simply waited until she had a stage large enough, and then she had said the thing anyway in the one format, where no one could reduce it or reframe it or turn it into a tabloid caption. She had put it on the record, not to win an argument, not to force his hand, simply because it was true, and she had decided that truth was no longer something she was willing to manage quietly on behalf of other people's comfort. He sat there for several minutes after the stream moved on to the next portion of the event. Then he got up, finished the repair, cleaned up the work area, and drove home. He did not make any decisions that night. He was not someone who made decisions in the middle of feeling something. He let the night pass, and he let the next day pass, and on the morning of the third day, he drove to the Hayes Dynamics building and asked the front desk to let Charlotte Hayes know that Liam Carter was in the lobby. He waited for 20 minutes in a chair near the entrance. He was in his work clothes. He had come from a job site and had not changed. He was aware of this and decided it did not matter. The lobby was glass and steel and very clean, and he sat in it with the same comfort he brought to any space a man who had spent his career inside other people's buildings and had long since stopped feeling like a guest in them. Charlotte appeared from the elevator bank. She was in the middle of what was clearly a full workday. Her badge was still on. She was carrying a tablet, and she had the particular forward momentum of someone who had already had 4 meetings before noon. When she saw him, she stopped. For just a second before the professional composure returned, she looked like a person who had not expected this and was not entirely sure her face was going to behave. She led him to a small conference room off the main corridor rather than upstairs to her office. It was practical and neutral, a round table, 4 chairs, a window, looking out onto the street below. She set her tablet down and looked at him. "You didn't have to come here," she said. "I know," Liam said. "I came anyway." She recognized her own words from the corridor, and something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the acknowledgement that it had been heard. She sat down. He sat across from her. He told her he had watched the live stream. He told her he had not been planning to that. It had been an accident, and then decided that was not entirely true and corrected himself. "I left the alert on," he said. "I don't know what that means, but I left it on." He looked at the table for a moment, then back at her. "You didn't have to say my name. You didn't have to say any of it." "No," Charlotte agreed. "I didn't have to." "Why did you?" She considered the question seriously, the way she considered most things. "Because I spent 20 years being careful about what I let people see," she said. "And I've built something I'm genuinely proud of. But somewhere in the last few weeks, I started asking myself what all of that caution was actually protecting, and I didn't have a good answer." She met his eyes directly. "You were honest with me about what you couldn't handle. I thought I owed you the same, publicly this time." Liam sat with that. He was thinking about what he had said in the corridor, that he wasn't built for the attention, that he didn't have the infrastructure. Those things were still true. But he had spent the past several weeks discovering that the absence of something is its own kind of information. And what the absence of Charlotte had told him was that he had been wrong about something important, not about the media or the pressure or the practical reality of what proximity to her life involved, but about his own reasoning. He had told himself he was removing himself to protect her. He had told himself it was practical. He had not fully admitted until he sat on a kitchen floor watching her say his name into a camera that he had also been afraid. Not of the attention, of being someone who mattered to a person again, of the specific vulnerability of that, of what it meant to let someone in when you had already learned in the worst possible way what it cost to lose them. He had not said this out loud to anyone. He said it now. He said it plainly, the way she had always said things to him, because it was the only register that seemed to work between them. Charlotte listened without interrupting. When he finished, she did not rush to fill the space with reassurance. She let it sit for a moment, and then she said, "I'm not asking you to walk into anything at full speed. I never was." "I know," he said. "I think I needed to hear it again." They talked for another hour. Not about the media, not about Hayes dynamics, not about any of the external architecture that had built up around them without their permission. They talked about what they actually were to each other, 2 people who had come from the same high school hallway and arrived at very different places, and had recently accidentally been reminded that the distance between those places was not as absolute as either of them had assumed. Charlotte said she had no interest in changing what his life looked like. She said it clearly. She was not a person who needed a project, and she was not interested in a dynamic where he owed her anything for whatever her company had grown into. Liam said he understood that, and he believed her when she said it, which was its own thing, the fact that he believed her. He had not believed many people easily in recent years. By the time he left the building, nothing had been formally decided. There were no declarations. There was no moment where the shape of what they were was given a name. But there was an agreement, understated and mutual, that they would not disappear from each other again. They would take it at whatever speed made sense. They would not let the outside noise make decisions for them. Over the following year, Liam built something he had been thinking about for a long time. A small repair and maintenance business, just himself, and eventually one other technician, taking direct contracts rather than working through a management company. It was slower at first, It required things he was not entirely comfortable with, like promoting himself and following up on invoices and making decisions about pricing that had no objective right answer. There were weeks where the work was thin and he second-guessed the decision. There were weeks where 3 contracts came in at once and he worked until midnight and woke up before 5 and felt underneath the exhaustion something that was very close to satisfied. Charlotte did not run any of it for him. She did not make calls or connect him to contacts or smooth anything over. What she did when he asked was sit across from him at a table and listen to the problem and ask the kinds of questions that helped him think through it himself. That was more useful than anything else she could have offered, and he told her so. Their relationship settled into something that was not dramatic and did not need to be. They had dinner on weekday evenings when their schedules allowed. They talked on the phone about ordinary things. She came to the neighborhood where he lived and walked with him in the mornings, sometimes early before either of their days had started. She wore old running shoes on these walks and drank gas station coffee without complaining about it. And Liam found that he liked her most in these moments, not because the other version of her was false, but because this version was the one she chose to show him. And that choice meant something. It was the version of Charlotte Hayes that did not appear in any press coverage, unhurried, a little quieter than usual, paying attention to ordinary things. He had come to understand that this was not a performance of simplicity. It was what she actually was underneath everything she had built. In the fall of the year, after they had quietly, undramatically rebuilt what had been broken, their high school held a reunion. More than 20 years out. Liam almost did not go. He had never been someone who attended reunions. They had always struck him as exercises in performing a version of yourself for people who no longer had any claim on who you actually were. But Charlotte said she was going. She said it casually, not as a request, and he found himself saying he would come. The gymnasium had been cleaned up and strung with lights, and someone had put together a display of old photographs along one wall, the kind of archive that surfaces when an institution decides to celebrate its own history. Liam stood in front of the photos for a long time. Class pictures, sports teams, candid shots from hallways, and events he barely remembered. He was looking for something without being entirely sure what. And then he found her. In a class photo from junior year in the second row, from the back, slightly to the left of center. A girl with dark-framed glasses and a careful, contained expression, the look of someone who had learned to take up exactly as much space as was required, and no more. She was looking slightly away from the camera, as though she had decided at the last moment not to be fully present in the image. He would not have recognized her at first glance. He recognized her now. He stood there for a long moment looking at that photograph. 20 years and some change. A girl who had been invisible in the way that certain people are invisible, not because they have nothing in them, but because the world around them has not yet figured out how to see them. And somewhere in this same building on a Tuesday, that no longer existed anywhere except in her memory, he had apparently done something that changed the direction of everything that came after. He had not known it then. He understood it now. And there was something in that understanding, not guilt, not regret, but a kind of sober recognition that settled into him and stayed. Charlotte appeared beside him. She looked at the photo and then at him, and she did not say anything. She did not need to. He reached over and took her hand. Not a gesture of arrival or resolution, just a simple, deliberate act of presence. The kind of thing a person does when they have finally stopped finding reasons not to. He was not going to let her disappear from his life again. Not because of the headlines, or the speech, or the year of quiet mornings and weekday dinners. Simply because she was standing next to him now, and he had learned slowly, at the pace he needed, without being rushed, that this was where she belonged.